writing, and if you wrote multiple stories, how did you decide which one to attempt to get published? Can I take that one? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I didn't start writing until my early 30s, actually. I had gone to school, I had started a family, I'd gotten married, not necessarily in that order. And I started because I got bored one day, and it just kind of flowed from there. Now what was the other half of the question?
Which story you knew?
Oh, how do I know which one? For me, it was when I started to write, I had a story that had been in my head for, since high school. And I finally got it down on paper. I was so intense that it was front to back. And I know a lot of writers don't start out that way when they're learning how to write. They write some and then they have another bright shiny and they chase that for a while, and then they have another bright shiny and they chase that for a while. But I was so intent on getting this one particular story out that I didn't have that issue. But I know there's got to be somebody down there who does.
Who had the issue of bright shinies?
I didn't have bright shinies. No. I had a really early failed novel.
Do you want to do next?
Tell us about it.
We're all friends
here. So because horror, I wrote my first not adult horror, but adult horror novel when I was about 20 years old, and I actually got an agent for it, which shocks me more than almost anybody else because it was so god-awful. I can't believe anybody signed me up. Because while maybe the writing was okay at best, I don't know whether it was a monster story or a ghost story. I had no idea about plotting. I had read a lot, but I had no idea, never really dissected the pacing of a story or the plotting of a story. So I had this cult of a town that had a beast living under the city, and there was a ghost that would make appearances now and then. And thank God it never reached publication, because I would be so embarrassed if you guys were coming here to see this and somebody said, hey, there's this book called One of Them floating around out there. And it never reached publication, but nobody's more surprised that anybody tried to sell it.
My first book was called Johnny Lightning, and my oldest brother is a writer, and he had something published in Belgium. So when I finished the book, he said, would you like me to show it to my publisher there? And I'm like, yeah, this is great. So I actually did it kind of backwards, and I was published in a foreign market before I was published in the U.S., but it was really cool, except I couldn't go read it, and I couldn't give it to friends for them to read it, and I could never see it in the stores. So fast forward to a couple years later when I was able to submit work to a U.S. publisher, I just randomly submitted one of my other books, which wasn't my first book that I actually wrote, and it was called Teenage Mermaid, and that's the book that my editor took at the time, and then she also signed me up for 2 more of the books that had already been published in Europe.
So as I said, I've been writing a very long time. I've been telling stories since before I was old enough to write. So lots and lots and lots of stories over my lifetime. I started trying novels in my 20s, and I was trying all different things because I love every genre. So I was trying mystery, and I was trying fantasy. And when you come down to, well, which book did you know was it? I didn't. At the time, I didn't. I was being told, this is hot right now, or this is really easy to sell. Romances are really easy to sell. Not true. This kind of mystery sells really well. So I've been trying to just get my foot in the door. All at that time, I was also writing a book about a female werewolf. This was the 90s, and everyone said, oh God, you can't get that published. I mean, if you have to write about this kind of stuff, and really we'd rather you didn't, but if you have to at least write about vampires, people buy books on vampires. So this was the book that I was always kind of writing in secret. You can probably guess which one got published. And why? Because I wrote it because I loved it, and I kept writing it when everybody told me you cannot sell that book. That was the story that I loved.
How long do you guys plan on writing, like in the future?
me, it's not a job as much as it is a lifestyle. It's a need to get it out on the paper. If I don't get to write every day, well, not every day, if I don't get enough writing time in, I get crabby and not nice to be with. It's like the brain needs to unload a little bit. So for me, I'll be writing whether anybody's buying the books or not.
And yes, ditto. I mean, I still absolutely love what I am doing, and I still cannot believe that they actually pay me to stay home and tell stories about witches and werewolves and ghosts.
Yes,
That's my turn. Okay. Yeah, I absolutely agree with what they both said. And yeah, I have an overactive imagination, as I'm sure they do as well, and it's always in there, so it's very therapeutic to get it out on the paper.
And I can't add anything new, same.
Yeah, you put your question.
Right back there.
Where do you prefer to write? Do you write from home? Do you write someplace else? Where do you come?
I write from. Now it's my turn. I write from home. I have an office upstairs, and I can write. I have 3 kids, and so I've learned to kind of tune them out. I can pretty much write anywhere. I can do it in the middle of an airport, in a hotel. It doesn't really matter, at home, mostly.
Too, I can write anywhere. I do wind up writing at home, but it's always it's metamorphosized over the years, and it used to be on a dining room table, and it used to be on a card table, and sometimes on the floor, and a lot of times it was against the wall, where I'm like looking at the wall, which is totally not feng shui, or however you pronounce it. But yeah, I just, wherever it is, you know, and sometimes I like to actually move around, because I think that helps generate a little bit of the creativity.
I remember the days of dreaming of having an office. You know, those are the days when you're writing on the kitchen table and you're writing in a corner in the living room. And I wrote my second novel, Stolen, was written in my office, which was actually the other half of my infant son's nursery. So that was my office. So then I finally got my basement office, where it was completely quiet and no distractions, and then that was the only place I could write until I started traveling. And traveling more and more, and realizing that this was seriously cutting into my writing time if I could only write in one place. So now it is, I can write any place where nobody's going to need anything from me, which is the biggest thing. I mean, I cannot write just, you know, sitting at my kitchen table anymore, because yes, 3 kids, they're going to want something, and that will pull me out of the writing, and I tend to get really snarly, and so it's just not a good mom move.
My writing style has shifted dramatically over the last 5 or 10 years. When I started, I had kids in the house, and I was at the kitchen table because I needed to be there in order to be a mom. I developed the ability to writer interruptus is what I call it, where I have to stop. I have to go take care of something else, but the wheels are still turning inside, and when I get back, I can jump right back into it. That didn't happen overnight. I had to cultivate that ability. I can write anywhere, but I pretty much 95% of the time, I am at my desk in my office at the keyboard, and I actually have 2 computers. I've got the laptop, which is what I do all my internet life on, and then I've got my tower, which is what I do the actual writing of the manuscripts on. And I have to do that because the internet is such a huge distraction. Because you're staring at that blank screen, and it's like, I wonder if I got any emails. But no, I have to actually turn and go to the internet computer, so that helps. But yeah, I write at my desk every day.